So I'd like to tell you the story of a younger, maybe a middle-aged young woman who has three children, and she chose to take the three children to treats, desserts at Dairy Queen. And so as she takes the three children, they're 5, 7, and 9 years old, and they all get in line and they all look at the big old dessert menu, the ice cream that Dairy Queen has, and they all choose something. And after they all make their orders, they all go and sit down in their booth, and they all pull out their cell phones or whatever it is they have in front of them, and they begin waiting. And as they wait, a few minutes goes by, and this young lady steps out from behind the counter with all of the desserts all in one big old tray, and she does everything she can to fumble them over to the family of these three kids. And she gets over there, and she's doing the best that she can to hand each child the dessert that they ordered. And the mother, just sitting there, is watching it all unfold. And unfortunately, not a single one of the children even took their heads or their eyes off whatever it is they were doing to look that young lady who had brought their desserts over to them, to even look that young lady in the face, to recognize that she was doing something out of her way to serve them. And then, unfortunately, on top of all of that, all three of the children, not only did they not recognize her or look at her as a human being, but most importantly, not a single one of the children even mentioned a nice thank you. And so the mother, maybe realizing this for the first time, unfortunately, lets a few seconds go by. She tries to count to 10 in her mind, thinking, well, here in just a few seconds, one of them will recognize this nice gesture that this young lady has done for us. Nothing happened. And so, all of the kids and the mother, they grab all of their stuff because they're not going to eat there. They're going to go to the park or somewhere else, and they're going to eat their desserts. And they all grab their stuff, and they're filing out the door. And as they get out the door, the mother has the vehicle locked. And while it's locked, she is the last one to come out the door. And all of the kids, go to their sides and get ready to enter in. And they start yanking on the door handle to the vehicle. And they notice that it's locked. And they give their mother that look like, we need you to unlock this so that we can get in, so we can go somewhere. And the mother, very quietly and very calmly, walks to all three of the kids and grabs all three of the desserts that she has just purchased and paid for, and very quietly, very calmly takes all of it and takes it over to the trash can by the door and drops it in the trash. And as you can imagine, even as quiet and as calmly as she did this, the kids, all three of those, all three, 5, 7, and 9, immediately began throwing a temper. And they began getting madly upset. They began acting hysterically and getting very frustrated. And so the mother unlocks the door and begins to pile all the kids inside, and what seemed like 5 or 10 minutes of them just yelling and screaming and crying and just being utterly upset. The mother, who has just sat there and has waited. Ultimately, the kids have noticed at this point that there is something that she would like to say to them, but she is not going to speak this until the children calm down. So they finally calm down, and she looks them square in the face, 5, 7, and 9 years old, and she says, kids, one day, if you're lucky, you will most likely have a job just like this. This poor young lady that was serving them was probably 16 or 17 years old. She was in high school, and this was probably her first job. And she said, kids, you're going to be in a position like this one day if you're lucky. And I would hope as your mother that when you do your job to the best of your ability and you go out of your way to serve somebody, that I would hope that those people that you serve, that they would have the decency to treat you as a human being, to treat you with kindness and just consideration and respect. And I would even hope that those that you serve one day, that they would have the decency to say thank you to you. And you see, that day for that family and for those kids was a life-changing day. Because on that day, that mother, who is normally the fun, the energetic, the exciting mother all the time, that day she wasn't the fun and the loving and the exciting and the exhilarating, energetic mother that she always is. That day, she was actually the mean mother. And on that day, she was okay with acting as the mean mother. And you see, guys, as a mother, if mothers are doing things the right way, in the biblical way, that mothers have a lifetime of difficult decisions to make. Much like that day, as a mother, that was an extremely hard decision for that mother to make. I want you to think about some of the difficulties in the decision that she had to make. You know, first and foremost, most likely, the story of a Dairy Queen takes place in a small town. So that means as a mother that she had to process in her mind all of the people that were standing around looking and watching and listening. And she knew exactly what was going to happen if she took those desserts away and threw them in the trash, that those kids were not going to take it very well. And she knew that there were going to be people there. I mean, just imagine, if you will, that this was a small town and it was on Sunday after church that she took these kids to get a treat. And everybody's wearing their church clothes. And she has to process in her mind, am I going to make the decision to do this for my kids, and everybody's going to see me do it? That was a tough decision. You know, that's not the only thing that's tough. There's no telling how much money this mother makes. There's no telling. She may even be a single mother who works very hard, maybe 2 or 3 jobs, just to provide for her children, right? And this $10 or $15 or even $20 that it costs to buy these kids treats and desserts on that afternoon, there's no telling if that was a special $10 or $20, right? And what she was doing was saying, listen, this is going to cost me something. This is going to cost me the money that I just put here for you to have treats. I'm about to take all of those up and I'm about to drop it into the trash can. There was no doubt that it cost this lady something. So not only are those 2 aspects difficult for this mother, but I also want you to think about the difficulty in the decision, knowing that her kids were not going to like her very much. Now, you probably are saying, well, being a parent isn't about your kids liking you, because your kids don't often like you all that much, but you would hope that they would love you. And yeah, we may say things like that, but the honest truth is, every parent, both mother and father and grandparents, you drastically want your children to like you. And it is hard making decisions like this, making big decisions like this, when there's other people around, other people are looking at you and judging you and watching you, and you're maybe sacrificing your money, and most importantly, that your kids, they're not going to like you sometimes. You know, that entails a very big decision. And as you know, being a mother is about learning how to make big decisions. And so today, that's what we're going to talk about. The question for today is, how do you fare when it comes to making big decisions? How do you fare when it comes to making those decisions in life that are large? And the honest truth is that making decisions or making big decisions is really the kind of the centerpiece or the threshold between being a young person and being an adult. And for some of us, that may have happened when you were 16, 17, 18 years old. For some people, it doesn't ever happen until they're 25, 26, 27 years old. But there's some threshold where it comes where people make decisions for you, and then you begin to make your decisions in life for yourself. And so whether you're a mother here today, and we're talking about making big decisions, or you're just an adult here today and learning how to make, honestly, the right big decision the way that God would want us to, making big decisions is a part of every one of our life. And so today, the question is, how do you fare in making big decisions? And we are going to be looking at the text from Exodus chapter 2. And as we look at this, there are a couple things that I want you to encounter today in the text. I want you to think about how the decisions you make in life are. You know, you might be right now in the middle of a big decision. There may be something you're thinking about, something that you're contemplating, something that is on your plate right now, and you might be right in the middle of making a big decision. And so I hope and I pray today that you'll take these principles that we're looking at and you would apply them to that decision. If you're not there right now, then as an adult, there is no doubt that you're going to be making a big decision soon. That is part of living the life that we live. So that's one aspect I want you to think about. And the other aspect I want you to think about is I want you to think about the big decisions that were made in your life. Maybe it was a mother in your life. Maybe it was a father or a friend or a grandparent. And as we talk about these aspects today, the difficult aspects of making big decisions, I want you to think about those in your life who have made the big decisions, who have helped you, and who have maybe made those on your behalf. And that today would be a time of giving thanks for those people who've made decisions like we're going to talk about. So if you would, turn in your Bibles to Exodus chapter 2 as we talk about making the difficult decisions. Exodus chapter 2, I'm going to read verses 1 through 4. Now a man of the house of Levi, he married a Levite woman. And this Levite woman, she became pregnant, and she gave birth to a son. And when she saw that he was a fine child, she had to hide him for 3 months. But when she could hide him no longer, she got a papyrus basket for him, and she coated it with tar and with pitch, and then she placed the child in it, and she put it among the weeds along the bank of the Nile. And her sister stood at a distance to see what would happen to this child. Guys, this is the story. This is the introduction of the story to a man whose name was Moses. And Moses is one of the primary characters throughout the Old Testament. He wrote and authored much of what we read in the Old Testament. And this is the story of how he came into life. He is the baby in this story, and this is the story of his mother. And the first thing that I want to help us understand from this text is that big decisions, difficult decisions in your life, they require sacrifice. You see, what's happening right here in the middle of this text right here culturally is that there were too many people considered in the culture. There were too many people in terms of a population that was happening at this time. And so the leaders of the land thought it would be a good idea to control how many people were being raised. And so this would mean that all male children up to a certain age They were going to be killed. And this was going to be a way to help keep the population from not growing too large. Because as we all understand, if the population of people get too large, then it's hard for an infrastructure to take care of all those people. And so the leaders, whether right or wrong, obviously decided to exterminate these young male children. And one of those male children that is on the docket to be taken away is this little baby who was Moses. And you see the mother, Moses' mother at the time, she knew what was going to happen. She knew that if she were to keep this child, that the local land and the local leaders and the local government were going to come after him. And as you can tell, she tried hiding this child for almost 3 months. And after 3 months, she comes to the conclusion that she can no longer hide this child. And just imagine with me for a second if you were the mother of this child. And imagine how difficult the decision had to be to come to the conclusion that there was nothing else you could do, that there was nowhere else you could turn, that there was no other person or family or people that you could allow to step in, that ultimately if you didn't do something, if you didn't do this, what she did, that your child was going to be murdered. And so Moses' mother makes the big decision. She makes the hard and the difficult decision. Ultimately, the decision to take him and to put him in this basket. She tries to make the safest and nicest basket for her child as she can. But she has to imagine with me that you have to carry that child in that basket. That has to be a long, painful journey to carry that child up to the bank of this river, and ultimately that you're going to have to set it free in a sense and place it in the river, and to ultimately sacrifice being the mother of this child. I mean, just think about the difficulty and the sacrifice that this mother was taking on her behalf. And you guys, as most of you know, being a mother and being an adult and learning how to make difficult decisions, that one of the best aspects of making difficult decisions is about sacrifice. As you can remember in the story, there was much I told you about the story of the lady ahead, or the lady at the beginning of the sermon. And what's unique about her story is that the sacrifice that she paid was her sacrifice. It was about the crowd or people there at the store looking at her and talking bad about her, maybe gossiping or judging her. That was a sacrifice that she would have to pay. It was her money that she paid for those ice creams and those treats that those kids were going to enjoy that ultimately got dumped into the trash can. That was a sacrifice that she was willing to pay. And ultimately, it was her kids that were going to dislike her. And guys, you see, when it comes to making decisions as an adult and really as a mother, making difficult decisions is so hard because we often look for the easiest route. We often look for the most lucrative route, the route that will cost us the least amount of money. And we often look for the most popular route. And so when we are forced with making these difficult decisions, so many times the easiest, the fastest, the most lucrative, and the most popular, those are the things that drive us and motivate us in our decision-making process. But as we see from this story, making the difficult decisions in life, we need to be thinking about sacrifice. This is a great opportunity for me in my life and for you specifically in your life to be thankful to your mother, to be thankful to those people in your life who have made the sacrifices on your behalf so that you can be where you are today. It's often overlooked, the people in our life who sacrifice so much for us. And so this is just a great opportunity and a great point for you just to walk down memory lane for a couple of moments and to think about those great people in your life who have done so much for you in the same way as Moses' mother made the ultimate sacrifice for her child so that he could have a better life. Many of you are products of mothers who have made some amazing sacrifices in your life. And it's just a good opportunity just to say thanks and to remember that. You see, point number 1 is about difficult decisions requiring sacrifice. And point number 2 is that difficult decisions not only require sacrifice, but they also require faith. Listen to the rest of the story. Difficult decisions often require the testing of our faith. Exodus chapter 2, verses 5 through 10. Then Pharaoh's daughter, she went down to the Nile River in order to bathe, and her attendants, they were walking along the riverbank, and she saw the basket among the reeds, and she sent her slave girl to get it. She opened it up, and there inside she saw the baby. The baby, he was crying, and she felt so sorry for him. "This is one of the Hebrew babies," she said. Then his sister asked Pharaoh's daughter, "Shall I go and get one of the Hebrew women in order to nurse this baby for you?" "Yes, go," she answered. And the girl went and got the baby's mother. Pharaoh's daughter said to her, "Take this baby and nurse him for me, and I will pay you." And so the woman took the baby and she nursed him. And when the child grew older, she took him to Pharaoh and to the Pharaoh's daughter, and he became her son. And she named him Moses, saying, "I drew him out of the water." You see, guys, this is the culmination of the story of God working in the life of Moses. And guys, faith is about seeing that God has a plan and that God is working that plan out in your life. So many times when it comes to our life, we often have faith and we see that God is working, but we often struggle with the difficulty that God is actually working that plan out in my life. Believing only that God exists is not faith, but believing and having faith that God is working that plan out in your life, in the life of your family, and in the life of a church, then that is faith. You see what's so unique right here about the mother of Moses is that she didn't have one single assurance in her life. She had to make that sacrifice. She had to take that baby, place him in that river, and she had no idea what was going to happen. And more than the fact that she didn't have any assurances that anything good was going to happen, she actually had multiple barriers that were difficult. I mean, think about it. I've never seen it. I've only seen pictures and done research, but if you've ever been to the Nile River, then I think you would be widely amazed. There are portions of the river itself that are over a half a mile wide. There are portions of the river itself that are rushing almost to Category 4 rapids. And Moses' mother has to take that child and look at this humongous river and look at that and go, "I have no idea what's going to happen, but I'm going to place this baby in a rushing water and have faith that the Lord can do something bigger than I can do. Not only was the river wide and rushing, but as you can imagine, living in the area, you would have seen and known about all the predators that are living in the area. All of the crocodiles, all of the alligators, all of the snakes and creatures and things that live there. And you have to take your child and place your child in a place where you have no assurances that this child is even going to make it through the night. But by faith, overcoming that obstacle. And you see, the greatest barrier that this woman would have had to face was the barrier of the local land, the local government, and the local leaders. You see, she was up against something that she had no way of controlling. She was up against something that she had no way of just spending more money and getting the situation taken care of. She had no way of contacting her local congresspeople or senators and filing a complaint. You see, she was up against a barrier in her life that was one that was unmovable. In this local land, these local leaders and this government, they were about to eradicate her child. And guys, when I look at my life and I think about your life and I look at this text, it draws me, hopefully, and it draws you closer to faith in the Lord. Because the story is about a woman who places her faith ultimately in what the Lord can do. Not in what the barriers of this world put in front of her, but in what the Lord possibly can do in our lives. If you were here last week, we defined faith as believing that things are possible, but not that things are easy. And this story is about sacrifice and faith on behalf of Moses' mother. And as she places him there, not having any assurances, not having any idea about what the Lord would do, but the story is so beautiful because the Lord takes something that is drastically broken. She takes the crying, helpless child, and the Lord manufactures a way for the right people at the right time to step into the situation, to step into the circumstances, not only saving the child, but ultimately restoring that relationship of the child back with that sacrificial and faithful mother. Guys, there's no other way to explain what happens in this story other than just the generosity and the grace of our God who shows up and who is faithful to those who place their faith in Him. And so there's so much in this story that shows us about making difficult decisions and the sacrifices that are required to make difficult decisions, but ultimately the faith that is required when you and I make difficult decisions. I would hope and I would pray that as you are in the process or soon to be in the process of making a difficult decision, that you would be somebody who would actively pray and seek the Lord's face. This is why the Lord gives us the spiritual discipline of prayer in our life. This is the exact reason why we as a church are asking you to pray as we search out men that the Lord may be calling to serve as deacons. Because when we gather together, both collectively and individually, when we're in the midst of a large, difficult decision, both in your life or in the life of a church, when we pray to the Lord, what that says is that, Lord, we believe that you have a plan in this world and in our life that you desire to work out. And if I will trust you, if I will seek you, if I will obey what you have to say, then you will work in the ways that only you can work. And this story helps define for us what it looks like to make difficult decisions. You know, on top of that, not only is it about sacrifice and the testing of your faith, but this is the last point. Difficult decisions are often a catalyst for the Lord's or for the movement of God. And this is what I mean by this. You see, Moses here, this is the introduction. This is the story of how his life began. Little did that mother know that as she was holding a 3-month-old child, a 3-month-old, perfectly happy, perfectly healthy, probably 14, 15 pounds of just baby in front of her, little did she know that that baby was going to be one that the Lord would use in magical ways. Little did she know that her son that she held in her hands would grow up to be a man that the Lord would use in ways to bring people out of oppression and into relationship with God. And as most of you commonly understand and know today, as you hold your children in the palm of your hand when they're born, you have no idea what it is the Lord wants to work in their life. But as you are making decisions, as you are making the difficult decisions, I want you to think about that mother. If she wouldn't have sacrificed, if she wouldn't have been a woman and a mother of faith, and she would have just kept going and doing what she was doing, ultimately, probably the conclusion of the story would have been Moses, as a Hebrew baby, would have been murdered. And the story would have ended with that person right there. But a mother, in the midst of a difficult decision, chose to sacrifice, chose to make a decision based upon faith that the Lord would do what only He can do. And ultimately, it was that decision that propels the story for the Lord to move and work in a way that only He can work. This is the difference in your life when you're making decisions between making decisions that are good and decisions that are best. So much of our life as adults revolves around you and I reaching a pathway and having a difficulty in terms of understanding, should I go right, should I go middle, or should I go left? And as you and I look at these decisions in our life, most of the time we are battling between decisions of things that are good and ultimately that one thing that is the best, the thing that the Lord wants most for our lives. And you see, if we choose to follow some of the principles of Scripture, and if we choose to be people who walk by faith and who make the decisions in the way that the Lord calls us to make these decisions, then we will be making decisions that are best and not settling for decisions that are just good enough. And ultimately, you can look back days or years or decades earlier, and you can look back on those decisions and you can see how they were a catalyst for the Lord to miraculously work and move in ways that you couldn't have ever even understood. All because you chose to make the decision of what was best that the Lord had for your life instead of just something that was good. So as we get a chance to wrap up today, and as we get a chance to allow the Holy Spirit to continue to speak into our life, we come back to the original question that just says, what big decisions, what difficult decisions are you in the midst of making? And as you think about that, I want you to ask yourself, am I willing to make a difficult decision that requires sacrifice? And if that's difficult for you, and honestly, that is a difficult stone or barrier to get past, I would hope and I would pray that you would ask the Lord to show you the people in your life who've made such great sacrifices on your behalf. And that would encourage you, and that would help motivate you to say, listen, as I'm making this difficult decision, I hope and I pray today that I would make it not for the easiest, not for the quickest and the fastest way out, not for the most popular, but I would make the decision today based upon what I need to give up. And then secondly, as you're making a difficult decision today, would you be a person who would say, I'm more interested in what the Lord has to say than what everybody else in the world has to say. I'm more interested in making this decision by faith, faith in a God who works in miraculous ways, believing that He wants to work in my life and through this decision, and that would be you. So where are you at today? What decisions are you in the midst of making today? Are you thankful today for a mother who's made decisions on your behalf that were full of sacrifice, full of a life of faith? I pray today that today is a celebration of mothers and people who have blessed you in your life. Would you stand today as we gather together just to have an invitation?